How to Read a Book was first published in early months of 1940s. To my surprise and, I confess to my delight, it immediately became a bestseller and remained at the top of the nationwide bestseller list for more than a year. Since 1940, it has continued to be widely circulated in numerous paintings, both hardcover and paperback, and has been translated into other languages: French, Swedish, German, Spanish, and Italian. The reasons for doing so lies in changes that taken place both in our society in the last 30 years and in the subject itself. Today, many more of the young men and women who complete high school enter another complete 4 years of college, as a much large proportion of population has become literate in spite of, even because of, the popularity of radio and television. There has been a shift on interest from reading fictions to reading non-fictions. The educators of country has acknowledged that teaching the young to read in the most elementary sense that world in our paramount education problem. A recent Secretary of Department Health, Education and Welfare, designating the 70s as a decade of reading, has dedicated federal funds in support of a wide variety of efforts to improve proficiency in the basic skills, and many of these efforts have scored some success at a level which children are initiated into the art of reading. In addition, adults in large numbers have captivated by the glittering promises made by speed reading courses promises to increase their comprehension of what they read, as well as the speed in reading it. However, some things that has not changed in the last 30 years. One constant is that achieve all the purposes of reading and the desideratum. Desideratum has most ability to read different things at different appropriate speeds, not everything at the greatest possible speed. As Pascal observed 300 years ago, when we read too fast or too slowly, we understand nothing. Since speed reading has become national fad, that this new edition of How to Read Books deals with the problems and the purposes variable speed reading as a solution. The aim of being read better, always better, sometimes slower, sometimes faster. Desideratum. Desiderata. Another thing that has not changed, unfortunately, is failure carrying instruction in reading beyond the elementary level. Most of our education, ingenuity, money, and effort is spent on reading instruction in the first 6 years grades. Beyond that, little formal training is provided to carry students to higher, quite distinct levels of skill. That was true in 1939 when Professor James Marshall of Columbia University's teachers colleges writing articles for Atlantic Monthly entitled "The Failure of the Schools" that he had then in 2 paragraphs that I am going to have to quote is still true. Do do pupils in school learn to read in their mother tongue effectively? Yes and no. Up the 5th grade and 6th grade. Reading on the whole is effectively taught and well learned, to the level we find a steady, general improvement. But beyond that curves flattened out to a dull level. This is not because the person arrives at his natural limits of efficiency when he reaches the 6th grade, for it has been shown again and again that spatial tuition much older children and also adults make enormous improvement. Nor does it mean that most 6th graders to read well enough for all practical purposes. A great many pupils do poorly in high school because of their sheer inaptitude in getting meaning from the printed page. They can improve and they can improve, but they don't. The average high school graduate has done a great deal of reading, and if he goes to the challenge, he has a great deal more. But he is likely to be a poor and incompetent reader. Not that that holds the truth of average students. Not the person who has a subject for special remedial treatment. He can follow a simple piece of fiction and enjoy it, but he uptake again closely written exposition, carefully and economically stated argument, or a passage requiring critical consideration, he is at lost. It has been shown that, for instance, the average high school student is amazingly inept in indicating the eccentrical thought of a passage, or the levels of emphasis em- emphasis and subordination in an argument or exposition. To all intent and purpose, he remains the sixth grade reader until well along in college. If it was a need for how to read a book 30 years ago, as a reception of the first edition of the book would certainly seem to indicate, the need is much greater today, but response to the greater need is not the only for that matter the main motive in writing the book. New insight introduced to the new problem of learning how to read as much as more comprehensive and better ordered analysis of complex art of reading. The flexible application of the basic rules differently types of reading, in fact every variety of reading matter, and the discovery and the formation of new rules of reading and the conception of the pyramids of reading to read. But broad at the bottom and the pattern at the top, all these things not treated adequately, not treated at all in the book and I wrote 30 years ago, called The Exposition and demanded through the rewriting that has now become done and is being published. The year after How to Read a Book was published, appeared under the title How to Read Books. Professional Richard and I. A. Richard wrote serious treatise entitled How to Read a Page. I mention both to this sequel in order to point out that problems of reading suggested by both of these titles, jocular as well as serious one, are full threatening in this writing, especially the problem of how to read a number of real books in relation to one another and read them in such a way that conflicting things they had to say about a common subject are clearly grasped. Among the reasons for rewrite How to Read a Book, I have stressed things to be said about the art of reading, the points to be made about his need for requiring higher levels of skill in this art, which were not touched by or development in the original version of this book. Anyone who wishes to discover how much has been added to so quickly comparing the present table of content with that of the original and even that has been largely recast. This introduction in part one of the distinction of the four levels of reading element in suspiciously, analytically, and syntopically is the basic and controlling changes in the book organization and content. The exhibition in part 3 is different ways to approach different kinds of reading in material, practical, theoretical books, imaginative literature, lyric, poetry, epics, novels, plays, history, science, and mathematics, social science, and philosophy, as well as reference books. Current journalism and even advertising is most extensive. Additional has been made. Finally, the discussion of within topical reading in part 4 is whole new. In the work of adapting, recasting, and rewriting this book, I have been joined the Charles Van Doren, who have many years now have been my associate at the Institute of Philosophical Research. We have worked together on other books, notably the 20-volume Annals of America, published by Encyclopedia Britannica, Inc. in 1969, It was perhaps more relevant to the present cooperative venture in which we have been engaged in co-authors is that during the last 8 years, Charles Wen and I have worked closely together in conducting discussion groups on great books and in modern executive seminar in Chicago, San Francisco, and Aspen. In the course of these experiences, we have acquired many of the new insight and have gone into writing this book. I'm grateful to Mr. Van Doren and for the contribution he has made to our joint effort. And he and I together wish to express our deepest gratitude for all the constructive criticism, guidance, and help that we have received from our friend Arthur L. H. Rubin that persuaded us to introduce many of the important changes that distinguish this book from the predecessor and make it, we hope, a better and more useful book. Mortimer J. Alder, Boca Grande, March 26, 1972.